Welcome, this is Algebra 2, Semester 2, Unit 7A, Section 8.6. Hey, I just was looking over the notes that we just finished in that last section, and I hope that you caught this error that I made. When we multiplied that 7 times x, and then 7 times 8, we forgot to multiply the 7 times 8. That should have been 56, which brings me down to having a 56 here. So go back and change that in your notes. I apologize. I really do like to run these tapes without too much editing so that you get real life and we get to learn from our mistakes. Our brains actually seem to grow more when we make mistakes, and I want you to be okay with making mistakes. I'm going to make some on the tape. So here we go. Algebra 2, Semester 2, Unit 7A, Section 8.6. In this problem, now we're taking what we've learned in the previous units, and we're actually going to find the answer to equations. So, again, it's kind of the same process. We will look for lowest common denominator. In this situation, it's to kind of clear the fractions out of the problem. So the first thing that I do is I factor this. It's one of those shortcuts. It is a positive 15. So I know that the signs will be the same. Since this inside sign is negative, they're both going to be negative. I think of the factors that multiply to 15, add to be 8, and it would be 3 and 5. Now I just kind of mark that out so that I have that as my denominator. Over here, this denominator is x times x minus 5 in factored form. So I can mark that out. So our denominators are x minus 3, x minus 5, and x minus 5 and x. So what we need to multiply every term by, our lowest common denominator, we would bring the x in there. Then we would bring in an x minus 5. And then we would bring in the x minus 3. So now we go along and we multiply each term by this lowest common denominator. Okay, so as we multiply this first one, we see that the x minus 5 and the x minus 3 would reduce. That would leave us with an x times x on top. Now in the next term, all that we had was an x, so we see that we are going to be multiplying that 1 by x minus 5 and x minus 3. Now we have our equals, and on the last one we have the x and the x minus 5, so what we're multiplying by is the x minus 3 times 4x minus 1. Squeeze it in here. Okay, now we need to go ahead and work this out. I'm going to scoot it this way as I work it out. So I have the x squared. 1 times x would be 1x. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. So really all I need to do is FOIL this. So I have x times x, my first would be x squared. Negative 5x is my inside. Negative 3x is my outside. So if I combine those, that's negative 8x. Negative 5 times negative 3 is a positive 15. And if you were thinking about a shortcut here, we got those two factors from that trinomial right there in the problem. So you could have just brought it back to being that without multiplying. Now this one we haven't seen in multiplied form yet, so we'll go ahead and do that. 4x times x would be 4x squared. 4x times negative 3 is negative 12x. On the inside we have a negative 1x, so negative 12x and negative 1x would be negative 13x. Negative 1 times negative 3 is a positive 4. Okay? So now we can combine our like terms. We have 2x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 4x squared minus 13x plus 4. And bringing these, gathering them to one side, I'm just going to gather them to the right since that 4x squared is larger, and that way I get into the positives with my leading coefficient. So I subtract 2x squared from each side. That one will wipe out. Now to wipe out my 8x, I would add 8x. I add it to both sides, so that'll wipe out. In order to eliminate that 15, I'd have to subtract it. So I subtract it from each side. And I end up with 2x squared minus 5x minus 11. Okay. I can set that all equal to 0 because that's what I've done there. And now I'm just pausing for a second to make sure that I haven't made any errors on this one. I don't see it in my notes over here, so we'll just keep rolling with it. Something's looking funny though. Let me see if I can spot it. And I am not seeing it. I apologize. Just for the pause for a minute. I hate to make 2 mistakes in a row right here on your videos. Let me just double check. X squared minus 8x plus 15 equals x times x, 4x squared. Negative 12x and a negative 1x would be negative 13x. Oh, there's the error. I so apologize. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3 times negative 1 is a positive 3. Wow, I must be tired this morning. So we have a positive 3 here, minus 15, which makes a negative 12. Now the reason that I was pondering right there and thinking that there might be an error is I was looking ahead to factoring and it wasn't going to factor. Most of these problems will factor so that you can give me a factored answer. We aren't using the quadratic formula yet. So negative 12 times 2 is a negative 24. What multiplies to be negative 24 and adds to be negative 5 would be negative 8 and positive 3. So we convert that to 4 term. 2x squared minus 8x plus 3x minus 12 all equals 0. We factor our first 2 terms and we get 2x times x minus 4. So we repeat that x minus 4 and we put in a plus 3 because 3 times x would be 3x, 3 times negative 4 would be negative 12. Now we factor out that x minus 4, 0 equals x minus 4, and we have 2x plus 3 left. Now we know if we have 2 numbers multiplied together and they equal 0, one of them has to equal 0. This one would equal 0 when x is equal to 4. We can see that. This one, you might have to actually set it up equal to 0. Subtract 3 from each side. 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2, x equals negative 3 halves. So when you plug in the negative 3 halves or the 4, that equation will end up being true. That's what that's telling you. Good job on all that math. And way to hang in there for me when I made the mistake. Now again, we look at common denominators. We're just going to clear the fractions like we did up in that problem. Here we have an x plus 1. Here we have a 2x plus 5. Now you might be saying, well, can't I just cross multiply? That was kind of a shortcut little thing that we used to tell you were doing, but in all honesty, you're multiplying by the lowest common denominator. And I want you to make sure that you're seeing that step. So our lowest common denominator here would be x plus 1 times 2x plus 5. So when you multiply this LCD by this, it is canceling out the x plus 1, so you are just multiplying by the 2x plus 5. But I want to make sure that you see the process that you've been doing all these years. So it's 5 times 2x plus 5 equals, now you're actually taking the 2x plus 5, reducing that, and you have 7 times x plus 1. Clear the parentheses, we get 10x plus 25 equals 7x plus 7. 10x, we want to get them on the same side, so to eliminate this 7x would subtract 7x. We'd get 3x. We always want to gather our creepy dudes together. 3x plus 25 equals 7. Let's get the creepy dudes all alone. 3x equals, would subtract 25 from each side, negative 18. Divide by 3 would have x equals negative 6. So when x is equaling negative 6, these are equal. Okay, next page. I guess we have the rest of this section to do. The next one, again, we're going to find the lowest common denominator. It's 4x and x plus 1. Please turn off the tape. Go ahead and do this problem, multiplying this by each side, and then turn it back on and see what the answer is. I will write here what is done. So. Okay, coming back with me. Basically, you canceled out, reduced the denominator with where it was in the lowest common denominator when you multiplied, and then you multiplied the remaining terms. If you did not get that answer, talk to somebody in class or come see me. See if we can spot where your mistake is. Remember, mistakes help us to learn. There's no embarrassment in making them. Let's just work together, make a good team, and learn from what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. Lowest common denominator here. I hope you said 2x. If you did, you were right on. So now I'm going to go through and multiply each of these terms by 2x, reducing from the denominator when I need to. Actually, I'll write it out for you what I'm... 4 times 2. That's what I ended up with. So I have 8 plus x equals 6. X equals negative 2. So when we plug in negative 2, that will end up being a true statement. Next one. Our lowest common denominator would be 13. X minus 10. Multiply each term by that. The x minus 10s will cancel on the first one. We'll have 13 times x, then plus. The 13s will reduce, so we'll have 1 times x minus 10. The x minus 10s will reduce, and we have 10 times 13. So now we have 13x plus x minus 10 equals 130. Combine our like terms, 14x minus 10 equals 130. We add 10 to each side to get that creepy dude alone. We get 14x equals 140. Divide by 14, and we find that x equals 10. Please feel free to stop this tape at any point just to do things on your own and then come back in and check and see if you've done them right. Okay, next problem. First thing I'd do is factor this trinomial. So I see I can take the shortcut. I see that it's a positive, so both signs need to be the same. Since the middle number is a negative, I know they both need to be negative. What two numbers multiply to be 12, add to be 8? It would be 6 and 2. So now my lowest common denominator would actually end up being just that. So when I multiply this first one by that lowest common denominator, the x minus 6's would cancel and I'd end up with 5 times x minus 2. Plus 1 times all of it. I'm just going to go ahead and put it back here in unfactored form. So it's x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals, and now when I multiply this last fraction by the lowest common denominator, everything reduces, so I still just have 2. So now eliminating the parentheses, I have 5x minus 10 plus x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals 2. Combining like terms, I have x squared out front. Then I have a negative 8x and a positive 5x would be a negative 3x. 12 minus 10 would be 2. Now I need to eliminate this 2 over here. In order to eliminate it, I subtract 2 from each side. That wipes those out. And we have x squared minus 3x equals 0. Factor out an x. X minus 3 equals 0. Now, I know when these two multiply together, if x equals 0, that will be 0. Or if x equals positive 3, that would cause that to be 0, and then the whole thing would equal 0. Okay, just a couple more problems here. My lowest common denominator here would be x times x plus 3. So I multiply that by each of the terms. 1 times x plus 3. Bring down my subtraction sign. 8 times, well, the x plus 3's would reduce, so I'd just have times x equals 3. The x's will reduce, so I just have x plus 3. 1x times x is x squared. 1x times 3 is 3x minus 8x equals 3x plus 9. Now I can combine these two like terms, so it's x squared minus 5x equals 3x plus 9. Now to eliminate the terms over here and set it to 0, you always want to set quadratics to 0, minus 3x. That way you can factor them to solve them. X squared minus 8x. Now I'd also subtract 9 to eliminate it over there, so minus 9 equals 0. So I need to find two factors that multiply to be 9, negative 9, so it's a negative and a positive. I can go ahead and bring my x down here. And they need to add to be negative 8, so I just think of 9 and 1. 9 being farther from 0, it'll take the sign of that center number, so it's negative 9, positive 1 equals 0. So I can see clearly here that when x equals negative 1, that would be 0. When x equals positive 9, that would be 0, and so those are my solutions. Those are my zeros. Okay. Next problem. We see the lowest common denominator would be 7 times a plus 8. And I multiply it by this first fraction. The a plus 8's would reduce, so I'd have 7a. In the second fraction, the 7's would reduce, so I would have a plus 8. In the final fraction over here, the a plus 8's would reduce, so I would have a negative 56 times 7. So now 7a, and we don't really need the parentheses because it's a plus right in front of it. So 7a plus a would be 8a plus 8 equals negative 56 times 7 would be 7 times 6 is 42. 7 times 5 is 35, plus 4 is 39, so a negative 392. Subtract 8 from each side. The only reason we don't set that to 0 is it's not a quadratic. So we have 8a equals negative 400. And when we have linear functions, where we have just an exponent of 1 on our variable, we always get that creepy dude by himself. Now we divide by 8 and we find that a equals negative 50. Okay, how you doing? I hope you're pausing the video a lot and trying to do these on your own and then coming back and checking your work with me. Please do that on these last two. Again, find the lowest common denominator. That would be 4 times x plus 5. Because 2 will go into 4. So that was how I spotted that. When we multiply the lowest common denominator by the first term, the x plus 5s will reduce and we'll just end up with 4 times x. In the second term, we better go ahead and put the x minus 6 because we have a lot to multiply it by. The 2 will reduce, but that'll leave a 2 up there, so let's put it out front so we don't forget it. Then we have x plus 5 still as well, so a little bit to multiply on that one. It equals 2x minus 1 times, the 4's will reduce and we'll have x plus 5. Okay, so now let's shift it this way so we're clear of that problem when we do it. We have 4x plus 2x times 2 times x, and 2 times negative 6 would be negative 12. Now we've got that 2 out of there. Now 2x times x would be 2x squared. 2x times 5 would be positive 10x. That's our outside, positive 10x. On the inside we have a negative 12x. So positive 10x, negative 12x would be a negative 2x. Negative 12 times 5 is negative 60 equals 2x times x would be 2x squared. 2x times 5 is 10x, minus x would be 9x. Negative 1 times 5 is negative 6. Now let's get everything over to the left-hand side and set it to 0. Negative 2x squared minus 2x squared would clear that out. Ooh, that means that we've eliminated our quadratic, so we won't be setting it to 0. Let's go ahead and combine our like terms here. 4x minus 2x would be 2x minus 60 equals 9x minus 6. So now our plan is to gather our creepy dudes together and get the numbers on the other side. So we have minus 9x minus 9x. That would cancel. That would be a negative 7x minus 60 equals negative 6. Get this guy alone. He's standing out there. We want to know what he's equal to. So we add 60 to each side. And we get negative 7x equals 54. And we have x equals, let me make sure that I didn't make an error on any of this. And I did. Oh, up here, when I took negative 1 times positive 5, I keep doing this today. Negative 1 times positive 5 is a negative 5. Okay? Negative 5. Negative 5. And so that makes that positive 55, which it's fine to come out with a fraction. Let me just double check in my notes if I can find them to make sure that that's how that one came out. And I'm trying to spot it. The only thing that I have different up here is I say that this is a... No, I think that's correct. Oh, I see where I did make an error. This was a negative 2x and needed to come down with a negative 2x. So therefore, negative 2x and negative 9x is negative 11x. And negative 11x divides into positive 55, negative 5 times. The only reason that I'm double checking those is although fractions are fine to have, a lot of times they'll come out evenly on these practice problems. And usually on a test I'll be pretty gentle to give you nice fractions. So if you get something that's real bizarre, just go back and double check to make sure that you haven't dropped a negative or made a silly multiplication error. Okay? We all get rushed, we all get kind of tired as we're doing these, so I'm just helping you to see how I'm catching errors there. My lowest common denominator here would be 2 times x plus 10. So when we multiply this first fraction by our lowest common denominator, the x plus 10 reduces and we get 12 times 2 equals, and this one the 2 cancels, so we get x times x plus 10. We get 24 equals x squared plus 10x. Now because it's a quadratic, we're going to set it equal to 0, so we subtract 24 from each side and we get x squared plus 10x minus 24, and I'm just going to move that equals to this side since we're used to seeing it better over there. Now we don't need to play the x game, we can take the shortcut because we've got a 1 out front. So we have two numbers that multiply to be negative, so there'll be a negative and a positive. They'll multiply to be a negative 24 and they'll add to be 10. Well, the two numbers they actually subtract to be 10 because they're opposite signs. The two numbers I can think of would be 12 and 2. The 12 being further from 0, it will take the sign of that middle number. So we have when x equals 2, that would be 0. When x equals negative 12, that would be 0. Please see me if I confused you on any of my little errors in there. And hopefully you learned from my mistakes just like I did. And don't be afraid to make mistakes or have questions as you come to class. We'll see you tomorrow in class. Have a good day.